Hi there, welcome to Susan's 11-Minute Statistics. Today I'll be showing you how to confirm data integrity in Excel. Specifically, we'll be comparing double-entered files in Excel to ensure that your data entry was flawless. And all of that in 7 to 11 minutes, so let's get right into the meat of the issue. First of all, why would you want to go ahead and do a double entry compare in Excel? I would argue it's good to use this for quality control for any mistakes that may have been made in data entry, for example, typos or systematic coding problems, specifically that can result from things like changing your coding schema during the data entry process. You also want to check and be sure that all of your variables and cases have been entered. And I particularly like Excel because it is very compatible with other spreadsheet programs and also with different statistical packages. So looking in our Excel files today, you'll see I'll be using two of them. One is the S file and the other is the I file. So these are two different files that were entered by two different research assistants, and now we're going to be comparing the data that they entered to ensure that they are the same. First thing I like to do is replace any missing values. For example, I'll take this one out here with some implausible value for your data set. In this case, I replaced mine with 99999 because I did not have that value in my data set. What I do to do this is go ahead and click on Replace from Find and Select, and I'm going to go ahead and want to replace anything that's blank or missing with 99999. I'm going to ask it to do that using the entire cell contents, and I'll ask it to replace all. You can see it made one replacement here, which is what I expected since I've already done this for both of the data sets. So be sure you do that, otherwise sometimes Excel won't recognize data discrepancies if one of the values is missing. Another thing you might want to do is go ahead and sort your data files according to ID so you're sure you're comparing the same cases. You can do that by going to Sort and Filter, and you want to sort. You can do a custom sort there to be sure that you're sorting by ID values from smallest to largest, and you click OK. You can do that for both of your data sets, and then you know you're comparing the same cases. So now what we need to do is we need to move this baseline S file into the same workbook as our baseline I file. So let's go ahead and right mouse click on baseline S tab down here, and we're going to ask it to move this particular data sheet to our other workbook, namely the Demo I workbook, and go ahead and click OK. And now you can see that both baseline S and baseline I are in the same workbook. So you might want to save this as something else just so you don't get confused about this. And you can save that as, for example, compare baseline. That sounds good. And yes, we want to replace that. Now what we need to do is go ahead and click here on Insert Worksheet. And we can rename that. I like to rename it Compare, just so it's clear that's the compare sheet where I'm comparing the two data files. And now we want to ensure that, first of all, our variables are in the same order and that we have the same variables in both data sets. And we can do that by creating our first formula. Use the equal sign to indicate that you're using a formula or a function in Excel. The if command will check whether our condition is met using a logical test, and it will return a certain value if it's true and another if the logical test is false. In our case, our logical test here is going to be that we want cell A1 of the baseline S datasheet to equal, and I just click on this with a left mouse click here, baseline I tab, the A1 cell in baseline I. And you know if you've done this right, it will highlight that with the little moving hyphens. So baseline S A1 should equal baseline I A1. Then we want to go ahead and enter the comma. It will tell us we now enter the value if that is true, if they are equal. And that'll be 0 discrepancy for us. And then another comma, and then the value if there is a discrepancy, we can say a 1. You can choose whatever value you want, but I find that's pretty easy. So we click Enter, and it will automatically enter that formula into our compare sheet. And you can double check that to be sure that it's comparing the same cells. And then what we want to do to compare the variables that we have in the data set, what I do is I just clicked on this little box right here in the corner of my formula cell, and I'm going to hold down the left mouse key and drag that over to compare the 6 different variable titles, and they are all called the same thing, thank goodness. So now we can click on that same formula, and this time we can drag it downwards, click left mouse click, drag it down to 134, which is the number of rows in my data set. And that way we can compare the cases and be sure that they're in the right order and that they're the identical cases in both data sets. And if we scan up and down there, we can see, yep, they're all 0, so there are 0 discrepancies between the cases entered in my data set. Now that's pretty comforting. What we want to do at this point is we can go ahead and drag this down to B2. Now we can see it's comparing the cell B2 in S and the cell B2 in I. And what we want to do now is just go ahead and rename, now that we know the variable titles are the same. I click over here using the arrow on this first row. I'm going to use a Control C, or you can use the copy button up here. And you want to paste this by, again, going over the row 1 using that little arrow. You just click, left mouse click on there, and you can hit Control V or your paste button right there. And then you have now pasted in your titles. We want to do the same thing for clicking up here on the column header for column A. Again, a Control C or a copy button. And we want to take those case names over to our compare file, and that will make it easier for us to locate where the discrepancies are if we have any. Now we have all of our cases here in our names for the variables. So we can go ahead and click in this little square here and drag our formula across to the very last variable and then down for all of the cases, and now we're comparing our entire data sets for both of these entries. And again, I release the left mouse button once I drag that down. And you can already start to see the discrepancies in our data sets right here with the little ones. So what I also like to do is just double check in this final cell and just randomly throughout the data set that we're comparing the same cells, so F134 and F134 for the 2 different data sets. It's good to just check and be sure you're not off by a line. And what I also like to do is freeze the panes right here so that I can always see this top row of variables and I can always see this left column of my cases. And I do that by clicking on View tab and Freeze Panes. And that way it will keep the rows and columns visible even if you scroll way far down like that. So now what I want to do is I want to start checking my discrepancies in my actual data entry. So I'm going to go back into my Home tab here. I'm going to use Find and Select, Find, and this time I'm going to ask it to find the discrepancies, which we have called 1. And you can ask it to match the entire cell contents, but this time you want to ask it to find the values, because we have formulas in here too, but we're really interested in the value of 1. So we ask it to find our first discrepancy by clicking Find Next, and we find that at 508. That's participant number 508 for their maximum number of drinks. Now it just so happens that I have this hard copy data set in front of me, so I'm going to go in and check first for data entry S, and I see here for 508 maximum drinks, 12.173 standard drinks. Okay, then I go into baseline I, and I see, oh my goodness, here this person apparently, according to the other entry, has had 173 drinks that night, which is not possible and is not what my questionnaire says. So we'll go ahead and change that answer to make it in line with our hard copy data set. And if you go back to compare, you can see that now the matter has resolved itself. There's now no discrepancy between D5 in baseline S and D5 in baseline I. And you just go ahead and find the next discrepancy, check that against your hard copy data set as well. And the only thing you want to avoid while you're going through your data set systematically is don't change any of these formulas in here unless you find that they've gone off. So you always want to make the changes to your actual data in your raw data entry files. Thanks for joining me. Hope this helped you figure out how to confirm your data integrity in Excel.